بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Continuing with the second part of rights of women in Islam, and I was not able to actually finish all the topics that we are going to discuss. So today it's going to be the second part, and next week inshallah will be the last part about the rights of women in Islam. We are up to speaking about traveling. The Prophet ﷺ said no woman should travel except with a mahram, and no man should enter upon her unless she has a mahram with her. A man said, O Messenger of Allah, I want to go out with such and such an army, but my wife wants to go for Hajj. He said, go with her. So that hadith speaks about the ruling of traveling of a woman without a mahram. That mahram might be a husband or a son or a father or a brother or anyone that was mentioned in the verse of Surah An-Nisa as a mahram. So the Prophet ﷺ is saying she should not travel. And in the other hadith down, narrated by Imam Muslim from Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ said, it's not permissible for a woman who believes in Allah and the last day to travel the distance of one day except with a mahram. So the scholars differed what is the distance of one day. So in general they are speaking about, as we spoke before, around 89 kilometers. So she should not travel that distance without a mahram. Nowadays we have lots of things changed, especially when we speak about traveling by aeroplanes, and some scholars said that they are more secure than the previous types of traveling, where the woman used to travel on her own in the desert, so she can be under risk and danger. But nowadays travel is safe, and so they spoke about the opportunity of allowing the woman to travel without mahram in an aeroplane, so long as a mahram delivers her to the aeroplane and the mahram picks her up from the other side of the aeroplane. And that's something that an opinion nowadays has been introduced to the traveling without mahram. Yet the hadith is clear, it should be with a mahram. So it will depend on the person whether he is comfortable to go with the new scholars' opinion of the eligibility of traveling without mahram in the aeroplane. There is a question, can the husband force his wife to travel with him? And this is one of the rights of women. The answer is yes, if he needs her with him, and that's part of the condition of her acceptance to marry him. When the marriage contract happens, it's part of the marriage contract that she is going to go with him wherever he goes. Unless there is a risk in the travel, then he can't force her. So he's going to somewhere where there might be a risk on her life, then he cannot force her. But if he is going to visit for example, tourism, or going to visit his family in another country, he can ask her to come and she needs to go with him. It was narrated from Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu that the Prophet ﷺ said, if a man calls his wife to his bed and she refuses to come, the angels curse her until morning comes. This is narrated by Al-Bukhari and Muslim. This is to say that this is something acceptable in the contract of marriage. No woman can actually reject the call of her husband. Women have the rights that are for men, such as driving cars, driving aeroplanes. They can do anything like the men can do. If a harm happened to a certain woman due to driving, then each case should be taken on its own. Some people say because lots of women got abused by others or got some harassment by others while they are driving, that doesn't mean that we convert driving of women into haram. So we cannot apply a ruling like this on women because one or two women got harassed or got abused while they are driving. Women have freedom of transportation. They can go wherever they want. They are not supposed to be controlled. Women can have their own emerging and appearance in the community, meaning that they can have their own position, their own organization, their own anything in the community, and can have their meetings and discussions, as Muslim women during history used to have their own gathering that men used to attend, and women used to manage them, so long as women are abide to Islamic rules, no touching, no coming close, modest close, no inclination in talking, then they can run their own discussions. No, in the history, we knew some women from the companions, and after that they used to sit down for fatwa. They used to actually mediate between men. They used to answer questions of men. So that doesn't mean that women cannot do any of this. They can do everything from this. Men have responsibilities in the house, not just outside the house. Women can be in any position in the country except a khalifa or a judge. So it's her right to be in any position in the country, whether this position is a political position, whether it's a company leader or president, anything she can be except as a khalifa of the Muslims or as a judge. Women are like men, required to enjoin the good and forbid the evil. So in da'wah, when Allah Azza wa Jal called men and women to do da'wah, it is for both men and women. Some people feel shamed of mentioning the names of his female relatives. This has no source in Islam. The Prophet ﷺ used to mention the name of his daughters, his wife, on the minbar in front of all the companions. So that's not from Islam to be shy to mention the name of your sister, your wife, your daughter, and so on. Feeling shamed of walking with wife in front of people has no origin in Islam. The Prophet ﷺ used to walk with Safiya and side by side, and the companions used to see him. Some people feel shamed when speaking with wife over the phone. So if he got a phone call from his wife, that should not be that the person feels that shamed. He doesn't want to be known that he's speaking to his wife. That's not correct. That should be a normal thing. Most of people points against women is fitna, attraction to women, and that's coming from the hadith. I have not left behind me any fitna, temptation more harmful to men than women, and this is narrated in Bukhari and Muslim. These are the women that actually deliberately attracting men and appearing in a way that is going to cause fitna and test. This fitna actually both need to fear, men and women both the same. Most of it from vision, so men and women were ordered in the Quran to lower their gazes. Not all women can be fitna for men. Some women can be fitna, but that should not make the rule that all women are fitna. So the Prophet ﷺ hadith is related to the women that actually deliberately want to cause fitna for men. The door of fitna should be closed both for men's side and women's side. Women should protect themselves, wear covered clothes, and men should lower their gaze, not expose themselves to the fitna. So both sides need actually to be together in order to close that fitna of women. Women can't be forced to marry anyone without her acceptance. Wali, guardian position is just to facilitate the marriage. So some people actually they abuse, and they are a wali, he is a guardian of his daughter or of his sister. He cannot force anyone to get married. A woman came to the Prophet ﷺ to ask for a divorce from her husband. She told him that she did not complain about any of his morals or qualities, but the only problem was that she did not genuinely like him to the extent it was impossible to continue living with him, the Prophet ﷺ asked her, do you return his garden, a gift marriage he offered to her, which is a dowry? She said yes. The Prophet ﷺ asked him to take his garden and divorce her. This is something to tell us that there is no force in marriage. So no one can force anyone to get married, especially the guardian. And if a woman actually does not feel that she can live anymore with a person, she does not have that good heart feelings, that love, that inclination towards him, she has the opposite, then that is a genuine reason, and she can return the dowry to him and he can divorce her. It was narrated from Abu Huraira that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, a previously married woman should not be married until she is consulted, and a virgin should not be married until her consent is sought, and her consent is her silence. So in both cases, no woman can be forced to be married to anyone, and all women need to be consulted for marriage. And the consultation can be, if she is shy, just by becoming silent, not refusing to marry, that will be considered as consent for her marriage. The Prophet ﷺ said, do not prevent them from marrying their husband. Allah Azza wa Jal said in the Quran, do not prevent them from marrying their husbands, provided they agree on fair terms. And this is something in Islam which is haram, to prevent a woman from marrying a man if there is no reason, no valid reason for rejection of the wali for getting them married. Allah Azza wa Jal said in another verse, O you who believe, it is not permitted for you to inherit women against their will, and do not coerce them. Do you know what's the meaning of coerce them? It's like prevent them from getting married. So keeping them aside, not allowing them to get married, in order to take away some of what you had given them. And all of this is a prohibition of preventing women from marrying. So it is haram to prevent a woman from marrying in general by her guardian, and that is confirmed if he regularly rejected people. So he has a girl and regularly people are coming to marry her and he's rejecting, that is haram and not allowed. And she can then, if her wali refuses to get her married to anyone, then what happens is she can go to the judge and the judge can be her wali, and if someone comes a pious with manners, then he can marry her without the approval of her wali, and at that case the judge will become her wali. The scholars said that 3 rejections will be enough to be considered as, we call it in Islam, adl, which is preventing the lady or the daughter or the sister from getting married, unless she is old and mature enough. For example, if we speak about a lady that is 30, 40 years old, she is mature, she is old, and someone came to her to marry her, and he is pious, and he is well-mannered, and if the wali, the father, refused to get her married to him for no reason, then she can actually take a step, even without 3 times, because she is mature and she is old. And a pious, well-mannered person proposed for her a marriage, then she can take it further. Now let's speak about the concept of qawama. So previously we spoke about her right to get married to whoever she wants, and her wali is just facilitating. Now we speak about the concept of qawama, which is the man is looking after the matters of the house, and this is a duty, not an honor. So when Allah Azza wa Jal gave the qawama to the man in the house, doesn't mean that he is better than the woman, and we spoke about lightly last time. The man in the house is responsible on all the house members in regards to providing for them and guiding them. So meaning that he needs to provide the money for them, and he needs to guide them from being astray or from going to hellfire. Qawama is only for the husband over the wife. So it's not for the man over his sister or over his mother. So it's only limited to the qawama between the husband and the wife. Guardianship is for the father, then older brother. So there is a difference between qawama, which is only for the husband over the wife, and guardianship, which is for the father over the daughter, for the old brother over the sister, and so on. Qawama like a president, and no company can have more than one leader, and for the family as well, it has to have one leader of the family, and that's the qawama that Allah Azza wa Jal set for the husband. The wife might be better than the husband, but Allah gave the responsibility to the husband. Let's speak about obedience of the wife to the husband. When is it required? When is it not required? When can a wife say no to the husband, and when cannot she say no to the husband? Obedience of wife to husband is the same level as obedience of employees to the chairman of a company. But we know that in there you don't get, the wife, when she obeys her husband, she gets rewards from Allah Azza wa Jal for her obedience. One of the conditions of the correct nikah is obedience of the wife to the husband in the lawful matters. So part of the nikah, it means that the wife will obey the husband in everything that is lawful, but not in the unlawful. The husband can't force his wife to study something or read a book. So the husband is coming to his wife and saying, you have to take a PhD, you have to take a master's. No, that's not his right. And she can say no. And on the other side, if she wants to study and he said no, he don't have the right to do that, because that's her personal life. So in Islam, the husband cannot force his wife to do or not to do things related to her personal life. But that can be from good manners of her to obey him in these matters. But if he asked her to do that and she obeyed him, that's a good manner, and she will be rewarded by Allah Azza wa Jal for that. Obedience in the matters related to the house and to the husband and to the kids and her duty as a mother, this obedience is obligation. So the obedience of the wife to the husband is obligation when it comes to the house matters, his own personal needs, and the kids' needs. So her duties within these three circles are obligations, and if she does not obey, she is in sin. Other matters, it's a matter of agreeing between the husband and the wife. The other matters should be discussed between the husband and the wife. Even serving him in lots of matters, if it's not the culture in the country where they live, then it is not her obligation to serve him, and he needs to bring a servant. Example, a husband might be a farmer, and he's asking his wife to help him in the farm. That's not her responsibility, because that's not part of the marriage contract. And she can say to him, no, I don't want to help you in farming. So for example, anything that is not within these three circles, which is the matter of the kids, the house, and the husband duty, outside these three circles, then it's a matter of agreeing between the husband and the wife, and he has no right to force her to listen or obey his order. And sometimes he needs to have a servant. And it's a matter of a culture of the country. So what is the culture? So if we speak about some matters here in Australia, what is the culture? The culture is the husband changes nappies like the wife. The husband cooks like the wife. The husband cleans the house like the wife. Can you consider this as a culture? If you are coming from a different culture, like for example, if you go back to a culture of, for example, from where are you, brother?
Malaysia.
From Malaysia. Is it a culture that the husband is looking after the house, providing money for the house, and then the wife needs to stay at home, look after the kids? Or if it's the culture, then it goes with the culture. So Islam actually goes with the culture if it is this practice, and her obligation will be to listen to him according to the culture of the country. Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, if a man calls his wife to his bed and she refuses, and he spends the night angry with her, the angels will curse her until morning. And this, all hadith related to cursing women are due to refusing to respond to the bed call, and that's not related to any other matter. It's only for that matter, the cursing coming, so she cannot refuse the call. Let's put some basics for the orders. Orders are of two types: religious orders and organizational orders. Religious orders are obeying the orders of Allah from four types. Specific obligation, like what? You need to pray Dhuhr. What is the timing of Dhuhr? Between this time and this time. This is specific obligation, individual, at certain specified time, and it's a religious order. Then you have wide obligation, so meaning that you have some wide time to apply that obligation. For example, Hajj. You have wide time. You have your whole lifespan to perform Hajj. Then Sunnah orders, which are religious orders, and then advice, meaning that it's better to do this than this. For example, it's better to wear, for example, wide clothes for the men than a bit narrow clothes, although both of them are acceptable and they don't show the awra. So these are the religious orders. Then we have organizational orders, like obeying the father. So obeying the father or obeying the husband or the boss at work are ordered in Islam, but they still have types. So what are these types? Allah Azza wa Jal said in the Quran, so fear Allah and obey me. Fear Allah is in the religious orders. Obey me, the Messenger of Allah Azza wa Jal, or the prophets that used to say that, is the organizational order. Fear Allah is for religious orders, and obey me for organizational orders. So organizational orders, so we are putting the things in context. So when we speak about obedience of the wife to the husband, the person to his father, the person to his boss, all of these are organizational orders. Are the same. They range from specific obligations, things that cannot be delayed, things that are specific, then these are specific obligations. For example, husband ordering his wife to look after the kids when he is out for the work. That's a specific order, then that needs to be done. Husband ordering his wife for something and giving her some time, which is part of her duty. For example, teach the kids for the school matters. Then that's something, because he's going to work, he's giving her some time. So she can do it at any time. So it's part of her duty in the house that becomes a wide obligation. Sunnah or advice, for example, husband advising his wife, well, I think it's better for you to study. She wants to study at uni. It's better for you to study this subject than this subject. It's an advice only, and she needs to decide on that. Sunnah is something, a sort of direction from the husband to the wife, that if she do it and obeying her husband, she will take reward from that. But if she did not, and she did not want to do except what she wants, then she will not be sinning. So the orders of the husband to the wife lie within these four. And unless it's unlawful, then it's haram for her to follow her husband. If the husband ordered his wife, some orders are obligation and she can't argue. Otherwise, she will be in sin. Some are wide obligation where she can do any time. Some are sunnah, meaning it's up to her, and some in the form of advice. Can a husband prohibit his wife from anything and she has to obey him? Can a husband say to his wife, you cannot buy Pepsi Cola? You are not allowed to drink soft drinks. Can a husband say to her that? Only if there is a reason for that, such eating something will leave a smell that he hates, or it's related to him. It's not related to her. Okay? She likes, for example, eating chocolates, and he's saying to her, no, don't eat chocolates. It's related to her. It's not related to him. So if things are related, as we said, to the three circles, which is him, her house, and her kids, then it is his decision. And if things are going to affect these three circles, then he has the right to say what he wants, and she needs to listen and obey. Can a woman leave her husband's house? Now comes to another point, which is, can a woman actually go outside the house without her husband agreeing on that, and she just left the house and she doesn't want to go back to the house? Can she do that in Islam? She needs to complain to the judge about the reason and should not leave the house before the judge actually approves for her that her reason is valid. And nowadays we don't have judges. For example, can a woman leave the house and don't come back due to a sort of, for example, domestic violence? She can go to the imam and she can say to him what's happening, and the imam can say to her, don't go back to the house again because that's domestic violence, and she can actually stop from going back to the house due to that. So what are the rules to control this matter? Number one is that we spoke about the verse that Allah Azza wa Jal said, فَأَمْسِكُهُنَّ بِمَعْرُوفٍ. So hold them with goodness. So if any act is within that basic rule in marriage, then it's acceptable. Any act that is outside that, then it's not acceptable. The other rule that controls that relationship is لا ضرر ولا ضرار. There is no harm. There should not be any harm. So if there is any harm, like for example, someone is beating his wife, then that's a darar, that's a harm, then that needs to be dealt with in a different way. Any harm to the wife, even if verbal harm, is not allowed in Islam, and she can actually go and consult the sheikh or the judge, and he can ask her not to go back to the house. Can your wife ask for divorce? Woman can ask for divorce if harm happened to her. So if there is no particular harm, she just doesn't want, or she liked someone else, she wants to divorce him in order to marry someone else, that's not a valid reason. And the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever a woman asks for divorce for no valid reason, then she will not smell Jannah. So there need to be a valid reason. Whether it's a deliberate, like verbal abuse or physical abuse, if there is, then she can ask for the divorce. If he is verbally abusing her, or if he is physically abusing her, she can ask in Islam for divorce. Or harm in his natural creation that she is not comfortable with, so he has been created in a way that actually this way is harming her. It's not in his manners, but this is how he was created. Then she can ask for divorce. Or harm not intended, like, for example, he can't give kids. What do we call it? Barren? Yeah? So if he is from that type of people, then she can ask for divorce because it's the right of the person to have kids, both male and female. What if the woman can't live with the husband anymore and she hated him? That's it. It's a matter of she can't live with him anymore. She needs to raise her concern to the judge and he can divorce her. Allah did not create people to punish others. So if she reached a stage where she's hating him, she cannot live with him, then that can be solved. The right of giving birth, if both agreed on delaying, for example, pregnancy, then fine, they can delay pregnancy after marriage. But if one wants kids and the other doesn't want, then it's the right for the one who wants. So if the man wants kids, the wife doesn't want, or the wife wants kids, the man doesn't want, it's not the right of anyone to decide not to have kids. So if both agreed on delaying, then that's fine. But if one agreed and one did not agree, then it's not the right of the man to say, no, it's my decision. It's the right of the one who wants the kids. So if a woman is the one who wants the kids, she can force her opinion over the man because that's her right. So in Islam, nobody can do anything within the family without both agreeing on that. Such a matter is very important. If one of the parents want to stop breastfeeding the kid before 2 years, then both parents need to agree. Example, you know how breastfeeding should be going all the way to 2 years. That's what was mentioned in the Quran. So the wife wants to stop breastfeeding at 1 year. He needs to approve that. The husband needs to approve that. Or the husband said, no, we want to have another child. You need to stop breastfeeding now. She needs to agree. So both need to agree on these matters, not one. This is a family matter that is not a decision of a man. This is a decision of both. So Islam gave that for both the father and the mother. Both men and women should look at each other to decide whether to go ahead with the marriage or not. So sometimes people feel that the man, for example, someone wants to marry a woman and he needs to go and look at her. Okay, he looked at her. What about her? She needs to look at him. She might not like him. So both men and women, when they're coming to the marriage, so it's the right of the men, like the right of the women, to look at each other and then to see whether they want to go ahead with marriage or not. It's the right of both men and women to beautify themselves to the other. So as the woman needs to make herself beautiful for the husband needs to make himself beautiful for the wife. The wife needs to put perfume for the husband needs to put perfume for the wife, and so on. It's not one side only. There is a clear evidence that women can't prevent themselves from the bed of their husband, and as well, he can't prevent himself if she asks. So if the woman asks for the bed, then he needs to make himself available. If a woman is not active like a man, then he needs to understand and try to find a medical solution for that. It is a sin for the man to prevent himself from bed for a long period of time. So it's not only the woman that is in sin if she prevents herself. It is the right of the woman to raise the issue of the man not spending on her to the judge. So if a man is not paying the wife the required money to sustain her, then she needs to go to the judge, and the judge will actually force him to spend on her because that's her right. Divorce is according to the marriage contract in the hand of the husband. Only we said that the woman can ask for divorce and the judge can divorce her, and this is Islam called khula, if she was under physical abuse or emotional abuse, and then the judge was convinced that this marriage should be broken, then the judge himself can actually divorce her. Now comes to another topic, which is polygamy, marrying more than one wife. What are the rights of women in that? Let's start with, is polygamy the origin or it's the exception? And this is a question that usually people raise. Is polygamy in Islam is the origin? So the origin is actually to have more than one wife, and the exception is to have only one wife. Why? Because they are relating to the verse of the Quran of Surah An-Nisa, the second verse, that says, and if you fear that you will not be fair to them, so marry from women 2 or 3 or 4, and if you fear that you will not be able to be just between them, then marry one. That verse actually was revealed because of a certain oppression that happened at that time. People, they used to marry the orphans, girls, in order to take their wealth. And Allah Azza wa Jal prohibited that and said to them, marry 2 or 3 or 4 ladies, but you do not oppress the orphans in order to take their wealth. So the origin that marriage is not only for sexual desire, but for kids, to protect chastity, to form a house, and so on. So men who can't afford financially or physically to marry more than one, it is prohibited in Islam, in this case, for them to marry a second wife. Someone who is poor, he hardly can spend on the first family, and then he wanted to marry a second wife. In Islam, it is prohibited. Meaning that it's a sin to marry a second wife if he physically or financially can't afford to open a second house and to give the right for the second wife like the first wife. The verse in Surah An-Nisa can't be used as evidence for polygamy, as it came to solve an oppression case. So the origin in Islam is marrying one, and the exception is marrying more than one wife. Can a woman put a condition in the marriage contract not to marry, for the man not to marry another wife? Of course, this is, even if that condition was put in the contract, this condition is invalid, because Allah Azza wa Jal has said that it is permissible for the husband to marry more than one. So nobody can put a condition in any contract that contradicts what Allah Azza wa Jal put in the Quran. So it's not the right of the woman to put that condition. No conditions are allowed in the marriage contract except those related to money, spending, and life-related matters. Condition that he will pay a dowry of this. Condition that he will buy furniture with this amount. Condition that he is going to let her finish her study at uni. That's a condition that can be put in the marriage contract. But condition that he cannot marry a second wife, or condition that she has to give him from her income. She is having income and she has to give him from half of her income. That's an invalid condition. Even if it was written, the contract, the marriage contract is correct, but that condition is not correct. So conditions in general and in the marriage are of 3 types. Condition that contradicts the contract, meaning that that condition is invalid. Like for example, what we spoke about, condition, a woman wants to put a condition that he does not marry a second wife. That contradicts the contract, because that contradicts one of the key things that Allah revealed in the Quran. Condition that is required originally in the contract, for example, condition to pay her a dowry or to spend on her. That's the type of contract, the marriage contract. That's a consequence of the contract is that the man needs to spend on the woman. So you cannot put this as a condition in the contract because it's part of it. But even if people put it, that doesn't make any difference for the marriage contract. Condition that is not a requirement and doesn't contradict, like how much is the dowry? It's going to be $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 put in the contract, then that does not contradict and can be applied for the marriage. If I were to command, and this is a hadith that people usually bring, if I were to command anyone to make prostration before another, I would command women to prostrate themselves before their husbands because of the special right over them given to husbands by Allah Azza wa Jal. This is a hadith that always people quote for the obedience, to force their wives to obey them. Well, this hadith, first of all, it starts with if. Meaning that would the Prophet ﷺ command the wives to prostrate to the husbands? The answer is no. But the Prophet ﷺ is saying if. If in Arabic language, law is a letter of prohibition of act. Meaning that the Prophet ﷺ would not do that. Would not make anyone prostrate before another. That's number one. Thus the Prophet will never order a woman to prostrate to other than Allah Azza wa Jal. But that's to give that really the woman needs to be actually, let's say, loyal to her husband because of what he is spending on her, he is looking after her, and so on. Some people say lots of ahadith came for the right of the husband over the wife. Well, the Prophet ﷺ spoke a lot to the men about their women. And for example, in the hadith, there are lots of hadith that spoke about the right of women in Islam. And he, even in the farewell ceremony, in the Hajj, he spoke a lot about women in his final sermon. And he said, treat them nicely, not to speak about her in her secret. You cannot expose the secret of the wife. We spoke last time about if you don't like from her a manner or character, you will like from her another character. So you need to be fair. You need to be, as a leader, you need to have patience on them. Not to be rough in changing her. Meaning that if you sometimes see some mistakes, you need to be quiet. So to spend on her from his money, to pay her the dowry, to do everything that is related to her, it's part of the responsibility of the man. So obviously the one who is looking after her is the man. So it's a big chunk of ahadith that came for the men to look after the women than the women to look after the men. Let's speak about marriage of young girls. Is it the right of the father actually to force a marriage of a young girl? If there is a clear difference between man and woman in age, education, or other characteristics, and the marriage is thought not to be successful and will cause problems, then this marriage should not be conducted, as marriage is supposed to solve problems, not cause problems. And the wali, the guardian, actually can stop this marriage from happening if there is something from what we see. For example, someone who is really in a difference of age group, or someone who is in a difference of culture, that the culture is not going to be acceptable between both, and so on. It is a strong opinion. Some people, they claim in the hadith of Bukhari that the Prophet ﷺ married Aisha radiallahu anha when she was 6 years old. The scholars went through the incidents that happened, and there is a strong opinion of the scholars that actually Aisha was married at the age of 18, not at the age of 6. And so, and I am with that opinion. He married her maybe before that, but he had the actual full marriage with her at the age of 18, which nowadays the scholars are more inclined based on the historical events in the time or the lifespan of Aisha radiallahu anha, that he actually married her at the age of 18. Islam gave the right for women, if she saw wrong acts, to ask for mediating. So a woman, her husband actually is misbehaving, it's the right of her to ask for mediating, to ask for solving the problem. Allah Azza wa Jal said, in the Quran we always quote that if a man fears from his wife some disobedience, then Allah gave the steps. There is in the Quran a verse, if a woman fears from her husband misconduct, so what she needs to do. So Allah Azza wa Jal said, if a woman fears maltreatment or desertion from her husband, there is no fault in them if they reconcile their differences, for reconciliation is best. So meaning that if the woman fears from her husband some misconduct or some abuse or anything, then there is no harm on her to ask for support, to ask for a third party to interfere in order to solve that problem. Woman has the right to advise, in the Quran, if the man fears from his wife disobedience, he will advise her and then he will forsake her. When the same steps here apply for the woman. She can advise him, she can forsake him in the bed, exactly if he is disobeying Allah Azza wa Jal. But the last step is not applicable in her sight until he gives her her rights. It is the right of women that the husband sits and talk to the wife and entertain her even though he is busy. So he needs to sit down and give her her right. Women are not obliged to spend on her house except her in-kind contribution. So if she is, for example, part of her time for her husband, her time for her kids, this is an in-kind contribution. She is not obliged to spend from her own money on the house. It's the obligation of the man. No man can force a woman to work and to take share of her income. The husband cannot force his wife to work, and if she worked, he cannot force her to give him from her money. A man can put a condition in the marriage contract that he has the right of any portion of her wealth. That's an invalid condition and will not be applied after. It is the right of the husband or wife, if they were sick, to be looked after by the other partner. Wife is sick, the husband needs to look after her. Husband is sick, the wife needs to look after him. So it's both parties' responsibilities and they are equal. Brother can only advise. Some people, you will see that some brothers actually they control their sisters as if they are their husbands. No, there is a difference between the level of the brother and the level of the husband. The level of the father and the level of the husband. Of course, who is the highest level of obedience? The husband. Then the father, then the brother. But the brother cannot do except an advice. If he saw her disobeying Allah Azza wa Jal, he can advise her. He cannot force her to marry anyone. He cannot force her to do anything. It's only her husband in some cases that can have a say on her. Woman can disobey her husband in study matters, whether to study or not, and she is not in sin. A husband is asking her to study, but she doesn't want to study. She can say no. That's her right to say no, and she is not sinning. Husband has no right to interfere with how the woman spends her money. So she is spending her money in her way. Husband has no interference on that. Education is a right of all human beings, men or women. If the woman wants education, she wants to study, that's her right, as Allah Azza wa Jal gave the right for the men and for the women. She wants to study any subject, she can study any subject. It's not just to study certain subjects. It has not been known in any of the hadith books that there is one woman in the history that her hadith was rejected. You know, in the hadith knowledge and the hadith science, there are some narrators who were rejected. So if they are in the chain of the narration of the hadith will be considered weak or fabricated based on this. You know, in all of these hadith sciences, there is no one single woman which narrated a hadith that is considered a weak woman. Only men were considered actually in the chains. There were thousands of men who were narrators in the chains of the hadith that are considered unacceptable and weak hadith and fabricated hadith, but no woman known by the hadith science to be weak narrator of any hadith. Women can learn at uni any subject and no restrictions. Some people try to limit the women to some certain subjects. No, they can agree together on what needs to be studied, but they can have the right to study any subject. Men can teach women, women can teach men after following the conditions of Islam, which is no seclusion, no khalwa, no showing of makeup, so the woman is modest, she is not putting makeup, she is not wearing things that are attractive. The words are modest, so there is no inclination and speaking in a way to attract the other part. Then women can teach men and men can teach women, and there is no problem with that. If the woman follows opinion of uncover the face, whereas the husband asked her to cover her face. So some women will say, well, I follow the opinion is that the khimar is not obligation. And he said, no, I want you to cover your face. Then she needs to listen to him because this is something permissible. And with that, then it is part of his right to ask her to put the cover of her face and to listen to him. Better for the husband not to interfere with all the permissible things that his wife chose for her life and to use this as a discussion. So in the permissible things that are between both of them, there is no, but it's related to one of the three, then it's better for the husband to discuss with the wife, but it's better not to force his opinion. But if it is related to him, if it's related to her kids, if it's related to the house, and it's within the permissible things, then she needs to listen. So he needs to say and she needs to. But it's better for him not to actually enforce his opinion and have discussion. Woman can be a mufti of a country. Yes, can be a mufti of a country. There is no harm, so long as she is not an authority. Woman can't be an imam for men. So there is no woman allowed to be an imam, and those who are praying behind her are men. There is no evidence for anything that is such. And the Prophet ﷺ allowed a companion woman to be an imam in her house for her household who were either kids or women, so she can be imam for that. Women have the right to own anything without referring to anyone. A woman wants to buy her own car without referring to his husband. She can. She has the money, she can. A woman wants to buy a house without referring back to her husband. She can. Women have the right to trade, buy, sell on her own, and this is her money, and the husband cannot interfere with anything. That's her right. So when it comes to her wealth, then she has a full right, and the husband cannot actually interfere. Women take half share of men when she is inheriting with her brother and the daughter with her brother. So lots of people speak about, and I will maybe finish with this, lots of people speak about that in Islam, the inheritance of women are half of the inheritance of men, correct? This is what they say. للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين. For men, 2 shares of women. Okay. We will speak about the reality in Islam. Okay? Some of these cases that women take half the share of the men are because of the commitments of the men over the women. So the women don't need to spend on the man, but the man needs to spend on the woman. But even though we are saying that, some cases women take same like men, and sometimes more than men in inheritance. For example, if we look at all the cases of inheritance in Islam, this is a summary of what happens in inheritance. There are 4 cases only in inheritance in Islam where women inherit less than the men. Whereas there are 7 cases where the women inherit like the men. So a woman will take the same share like the men. And there are 10 cases where the woman inherit more than the man. And there are 4 cases where women inherit and men are not inheriting. So when we speak about what they highlight from Islam is only the portion that women inherit half of what the men inherit, but the other cases nobody speak about. So in Islam, when we speak about how much people inherit, well, we need to be fair that women inherit more than men. And if you go to actually the percentage of women mentioned in the inheritance that will take money in the Quran compared to the men, 80% female versus 20% male. So actually the inheritance of women, the shares of women within the inheritance is more than the shares of men. So I will finish by this, and then next week inshallah it will be our last session about the rights of women in Islam. Anyone has any question? Did anyone write anything on the internet? Anyone has any question? No questions? Then we'll see you next week inshallah. We'll finish the rights of women in Islam. There's a question? What?
I was just going to say, we had a bit of clarification about the aura of a slave woman.
Yes.
I didn't get that one.
Okay. In Islam, when there used to be slaves, the slave women aura from the belly to the knee, like the men aura. Okay? So they don't need to cover their hair. They used to walk in the streets uncovered. They don't need to, but of course they used to wear some clothes, but their aura actually from the belly to the knee, like the aura of the man. Okay, that's in Islam. So the scholars spoke about the current day tribes that are seen nowadays in the middle of the jungle, like the Aboriginals, wherever they are. The scholars said that there are some cultures where women are actually uncovered from above the belly, and people are going there to visit them, doing da'wah for them. Can they actually go and speak to them and sit down with them? Because according to Islam, the aura of the woman is whole of her body except her face and her hands. So can they go, for example, and look at them or speak to them or sit with them? They are uncovered from their hair. They are mostly, some of the tribes, they don't cover from the belly and above. So the scholars, they said, these people are treated like the slaves at the time of Islam in regards to their aura. Only in regards to their aura, meaning that their aura is considered from the belly to the knee. So that's the ruling of Islam in this matter. But nowadays we don't have slaves. We treat these people just for the sake of looking at them, just the aura part only, but they are not slaves. Did you understand? So they are not considered slaves in Islam, but the aura part, because of their culture, is applied the slaves' aura only. Okay? Any other question? Did I answer the question? Do you understand? All right. Jazakumullah khair. We'll see you next week. Yes.
You say that a woman cannot go out alone without a mahram.
Travel.
Huh?
Travel.
travel alone. If she seek a husband or the mahram permission, like a father or brother, a husband permission.
Again, I said there are two opinions here. Opinion that she needs any travel above 89 kilometers needs to be with mahram. The other opinion is that if the husband allows and the travel is not too long and he will drop her to the airport, she will be picked up by her father, by her brother from the other side. That opinion says that she is allowed to travel without a mahram because the current day traveling is safe. Okay? Inshallah. Okay? سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. See you next week inshallah.